So it's my honor to introduce our distinguished president, Dr. David Bender, a distinguished clinical psychologist and retired society, well, not retired society president, because you're currently the president. I don't know why it says that. Because I'm retired as a psychologist. That's right, but you will be retiring after this meeting. I would be here in this conference. So, having presented on a variety of aspects of descriptive psychology in the past, Dr. Bender has ventured into the realm of ordinary daily life, where he will illustrate how descriptive psychology is proven invaluable in his own endeavors. His presentation will be divided into three insightful parts, beginning with the use of paradigm case formulation to shed light on an old yet vital subject matter, followed by an exploration of a heuristic from descriptive psychology that enhances clarity in addressing spiritual direction. Dr. Bender will conclude by highlighting the practical application of descriptive psychology policies in his volunteer work with organizations assisting individuals on the cusp of financial crisis. His dedication to illuminating the utility of descriptive psychology in everyday life promises to leave a lasting impact, making this address a must-watch for all seeking a deep understanding of this field. On a lighter, yet no less significant note, Dr. Bender wants us to know that descriptive psychology rescued him from the nonsense of psychological theories. And Dr. Bender eagerly awaits the sense that you will make.
Thank you very much. I've only presented a few times, and each time I've presented, it involves some aspect of my work. I spoke about AA and DP when I was working on an inpatient unit, and among other things, we were treating alcoholics. And I tapped the treasure of clinical cases that I had from a skilled nursing unit. When I started consulting there, presented several vignettes. If any of you remember Emerson and Bell and Bob. Anyway, I've been retired for a while then, so I don't do the same work that I did. It's different in a lot of ways. Most noticeably, now it's done without a fee attached. And I puzzled over what to say in my address. I knew it was up to me to say something. And it was in that deliberation I came up on the idea of talking about descriptive psychology in ordinary living, in ordinary life. So simply said, I'm going to talk about some things I've been doing and illustrating how descriptive psychology has enabled me. Now, my talk, as you heard, will be given in three parts. I'm going to present the use of a paradigm case that I have described, I think in the abstract, as an old one. Next, I'm going to use one of the heuristics in descriptive and say how that enabled me to clarify a particular subject matter in a discussion group, and actually it was in some writing that I did. And thirdly, I'm going to cite some examples of policies used by descriptive psychologists in their work with clients. Although these are clients that aren't seen in our offices for the most part, and they're not seen for any length of time either. I'm indebted to Dr. Peter Osorio, from whom I continue to draw heavily. Some of my colleagues as well, Dr. Ray Bergner, Dr. Tony Putman, Dr. Mary Roberts as well. Well, thank you. I'm going to begin with some preliminary remarks about paradigm case formulation. It may bore most of you. The common contrast that we have is with a definition. Or an operational definition, as I'm sure you've read many, many times over. Now, the difficulty in trying to use a definition to map your subject matter is that, first of all, it's almost impossible for an informative definition to not also be a reductive one. Now, in the natural sciences, where the subject matter is essentially invented, there aren't any real reality constraints on what we can say about, for example, electrons, ion exchanges, red corpuscles. But when we study the behavior of persons, the course of their development, the differences among them, we already have a subject matter. There already is a subject matter. And it is what we need to get a better grasp of. So we can do the bait and switch thing and define things in terms of other things. The worst one that sticks in my memory is how a behavior is the expression of a reinforcement history of the habit family hierarchies of that individual. You see why I needed to be rescued? And we shouldn't expect, if we carry off that sort of thing, to have a better grasp of what we needed to understand. We rely heavily on paradigm case formulation and descriptive to map our subject matter and the concepts. And our classic example, of course, is family. And the paradigm case of the family. You all know and remember, I'm sure, a husband and wife living together with their natural children. 17-year-old son, 10-year-old daughter, and an owl. So for transformations, to pick out additional cases, after you get agreement, of course, that you've got some something called a family there, and there was one. You change the composition. You eliminate one parent. You change the number of children to some number greater than 0. They might be all boys, or they might be all girls. You can change the distribution of the genders. Change the ages of the children. Okay? And as we go down through the transformations, there comes a time when certain persons will say, well, I'm not so sure about that one. Maybe not. You can add additional parents. You can add aunts and uncles. You can add grandpa to the family constitution. You can add in adopted children, or add in the fact that the children are adopted. You can eliminate the requirement of living together. Say the kids are grown and they're gone from home, or you've got a fellow who's in college or in the military. Is that still a family? You can eliminate the requirement that the parents have the status of being married. Okay. And all of these transformations allow you to pick up more and more of the subject matter. That's what they allow you to do. Now, significant differences between operating this way and using a definition. One, a paradigm case will identify a subject matter in instances where a definition just will not do it, because there's no secondary set of characteristics that you can use to validate the definition. And a definition is a definition of a term, but a PCF is a formulation of a concept or the range of its instances. It's not a formulation of a term. A definition is most likely reductive, but a PCF is almost impossibly so. And a paradigm case formulation illustrates not only which cases are picked, but also how they're picked out. Now, some reminders. Peter tells us in the site that you saw previously that we're to pick out the most complex case as the paradigm. We're to start with a case that's unquestionable. indubitable. And we start with a case that's primary or archetypal. You don't start out on the fringes and try to get home. Now, I'm going to give you a paradigm case that showed up in my ordinary life. Recently, I was participating in a discussion group at a local Catholic church. We were discussing temperance, chastity, and trying to work toward a better understanding of the church, teaching, particularly their teachings involving sexual behavior. Now, the group was struggling, and it occurred to me a paradigm case formulation might do the job. So I gave them one. And of course, I had to start out with the family to give them a baseline understanding of what a paradigm case is and how you use it. Because these otherwise well-intentioned men where you just use the definition. How do you define that? What are your terms? So I did the definition with the family, did the paradigm case with the family, and went through some of the possible transformations, and they were getting it. And since I saw that they were getting it and seeing the usefulness of it, even though some of them were handicapped, because they've been working in fields like, medicine, engineering, and physics. They had a lot of trouble, but they got it. So once we were on good ground, I presented the following paradigm case of sexual behavior. No, that's not it.
Not pretty sexy.
Oh. So what happened? Right, yeah. Well, let me give you this citation and then maybe I'll find it later. I'm gonna give you two citations here on friendship and love. Keith Davis and Mary Roberts. Because that's gonna come into play shortly. But what we have in the paradigm case. There we go. A man and woman married to each other and in a love relationship. There you go, thank you. Both of whom are willingly engaged in genital intercourse. Both are also open to the possibility of new life. They're not using contraception. Now, I take this to qualify as an archetypal and indubitable case. And further, this case exemplifies the church teaching in that it involves the expression of love or affiliation and is also directed towards procreation. Well, you've got some possible transformations, as you can see. Change the status to unmarried, married to someone else, remarried after divorce without a prior annulment. Right? Another possibility, you change the type of intercourse from genital to something else. You change the gender of one partner and also the type of intercourse. Delete willingly engaged. And you add using some kind of contraception. Well, if any of you know the teachings of the church, none of those transformations are acceptable. Only the paradigm case covers what's what. Well, the guy's got that. understood clearly at that point. Any questions about this case? Any what's wrong with the transformations I should share?
So, you can read myself, I'll try to ignore it. Sometimes when I talk about paradigm case formulations with folks, and they bring up an objection that the indubitable, the central case to which you're going to introduce transformation, sometimes people object and say that is going to be somehow be given a higher ethical or moral value because it's the central case. And in some sense, the transformations introduced go into cases of lesser value or what have you. And I with your particular audience and what you did, I wonder if that particular danger came up, right? That they're going, well, yeah, that is sexual, like that's, or did they go, oh, okay, we get it.
Well, they got it.
Right. But were they pleased that you started with their case as the indubitable one, and then the objectionable went through the transformations?
Well, what they got was in the teachings, the paradigm case is the only one when you look at these other transformations that's not sinful.
Right.
It's not self-centered, it's not casual, it's not anything else.
Right.
That you would talk to your confessor about. See?
Right.
So they got that.
Right.
They didn't raise any of those kinds of objections.
Well, I don't think they would because, well, I mean, I'm wondering if you got extra resonance from them or extra appreciation from them because you made the case that they prefer as the central case.
Oh, I'm not sure they all prefer this.
Okay, okay, all right.
You've heard the phrase that we're all sinners.
Fair enough.
No, I can't say that they all prefer this, but this is what the church teaches, and they understood that was what the church teaches.
Right.
So, yeah.
I would guess that if there's anyone in that group whose female partner is beyond menopause, would not appreciate that as the paradigm case. They wouldn't consider that, I mean, they would take exception to that.
Uh,
I mean, they wouldn't say, oh, yes, indubitably, they'd probably think about us.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
go along with what you're saying.
Two friends of mine, both of them were Catholic, both of them were in their 70s, both of them had lost their spouse. Decided that they loved one another and that they wanted to get married. So they went to see the priest about arranging it. And they shared with me, among other things that they discussed. The priest said, I know that this may amuse you, but I must ask, are you open to new life? Scholar. You know how old Sarah and Abraham were. And you also know that miracles happen. None of the guys in my group raised that objection. Now, it used to be the practice for some persons who took the teachings, you might say, out on a limb, to decide that intercourse after the impossibility of pregnancy was no longer allowed. We just shouldn't do that. We should live like brother and sister now. Anyway, what else? Anything else about this one? The guys got it. I mean, it was clear. Then we moved on to other discussions at that point.
Are there any online people that have questions can you ask?
Lane, do you have any online raised hands? Whatever you did, it sounded
Not
like
at the
it.
moment. Thank you. No questions.
Okay. Second part here, my useful heuristic. I was asked to write an article about spiritual direction. The article is published in a bulletin, if you will, that's an offspring of a Spanish renewal movement called Cursillo that has made its way to this country. And they asked if I would write about spiritual direction, and I initially thought, I don't know how to get at that one. But after a bit of time thinking about it, I decided I could. Now, spiritual direction is a social practice, providing guidance to persons, typically privately, in their quest for spiritual development, living a spiritually richer life, seeking spiritual experiences, and the like. You find it in all the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. You find it in the religions of Buddhism, Hinduism, as well as New Age religions. And you can find it in various philosophies of living, as is the case with Stoicism. Now, in thinking about how to do this, I turned to descriptive, of course. And one of the heuristics, again, from clinical topics, I decided might do the job. So I wrote a brief introduction to descriptive and described what difference it's made in my life, including ordinary living outside the office. And you find it there in Peter's work, Seminar on Clinical Topics, the collected works. Report number 11 from LRI. And here it is, basically. It goes under the heading of A changes B into C. It wasn't atypical when I was working for people to present for therapy with some listing of dissatisfactions about themselves or their circumstances, and with a request for making some kind of personal change. And one of the early judgments we're reminded of is to first of all make sure you're not dealing with somebody who's just involved in self-rejection, but that instead you're dealing with somebody who's trying to actualize potential that they in fact have. Now, I'm not going to get into the self-rejection side of this, since my paper is supposed to be a relatively short one here. I'm going to focus on the seeking guidance, self-actualizing side of this. But I did mention something problematic about people engaging in their self-change efforts, and that's what I'm going to get at with A changes B and C. Typically, therapists would let me do my job. Typically, but not always. Sometimes the person was acting as if they could do their own therapy work, making themselves into this person with these characteristics under C that they were desirous of. So here, typically, you've got the therapist as A, the person presenting as B with their characteristics, C with the desired ones, and A, the therapist has to have their own sanity. characteristics and abilities to carry this off. And these folks who came in trying to do it themselves were, for the most part, working through something that already wasn't successful, but they were still pushing it. And I lined up something like this for them. Usually I have a whiteboard next to my chair or something like that, and I whip something out like this. And I say, well, now look, if you're wanting to change to that from the middle there, the harder you work at it, the more you're gonna come this way. The more you're gonna become like someone who has the talent and ability to make that change happen. And after that would sink in, I said, but it's not hopeless, because there may be a little overlap. You could get lucky. Some of your characteristics there could be the same under A and C. But usually they get the idea that I needed to do my job. They could just behave naturally. And we could get the work done. Give up working in that undesired direction. There's also in clinical topics exposition of this under you can't get there from here. You can't get there from here. You go the wrong way. Now, the parallel for the folks for whom I was writing was in the spiritual life. And I asked them to imagine that the harder you work on yourself, by yourself, the more you can become like someone who can help make those changes happen. Instead of being the one in whom they occur. That's the place that's open for a spiritual direction. It's like letting the therapist do their job, leave room and make space for that sort of person. So when and if we can do that, the more we just naturally become who we are, following, of course, the directions that we're given, the exercises that were shown, readings that we're told about, and so on and so on. But we can do that without the extra effort of trying to turn ourselves into someone that we're not. Now, this path does not guarantee holiness, but it does make the striving somewhat easier. Any discussion of A changes B into C? No? Any online questions?
Well, I thought of a question about the earlier paradigm case, and Carolyn has a question. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, it strikes me this is also a good place to put in the rubric coercion elicits resistance in terms of how it goes wrong because you're coercing yourself.
Yes. There's a wealth of other good things in clinical topics too, for those of you who haven't gotten into it much. But that's certainly one, because you end up pushing yourself around. What's going to win out, the one doing the pushing or the one who's getting pushed. So we do resist that sort of thing, even when we're the ones doing it. Good point, Carolyn. Thank you.
So back to the sexuality paradigm case. I think it was really clarifying, beautifully clarifying about what that is. What did you have an intent with your audience in terms of how they might use this to expand their horizon?
No, my intent was just to help them see it. What they do with it is their business, of course, but, I was just trying to hold it up and say, here's what it is.
Did they recognize the universe of sexual behavior that it was excluded that may have been part of their own repertoire,
Part of their what?
part of their own, experience or network?
Oh, I'm sure it probably was.
So you were just illuminating it for them.
I didn't invent the teachings of the church. Much as I might like to think so. No, I didn't. People are gonna do what they're gonna do, whatever the rules and requirements are. And if you're someone who drives on public roads these days, you know exactly what I mean. Speed limits are suggestions. Stop signs are pauses in the action. Do people know better? Well, sure they do. Do they know otherwise? Sure they do. Well, but they do serve themselves, and we'll probably continue to behave that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is somebody keeping time? How much time do I have?
Well, it's 7 right now, so
What?
it's at 7 o'clock right now.
Oh, it's going faster than I thought.
You're doing great.
Okay. Who's Alice? I gave the guys at dinner a teaser about this. Alice is an acronym. I don't know if it was created by my local United Way or if they just borrowed it. But it describes certain households within the county in which I live, Blount County, named after the governor of the first territory of Tennessee, for those of you who have a historical interest, William Blount. But anyway, it's on the eastern edge of Tennessee, bordering the Smoky Mountains. Lovely place. You should come see it. Asset limited, income constrained and employed. ALICE. From 2021, data that we have shows that almost half of the senior households, Hispanic households, and households of persons with disabilities qualify as ALICE or below. 55% of those households led by someone under 25 years of age. 3/4 of the single female-headed households, especially those with children. In other words, a lot of people. To give you a couple of examples. A single adult living in my county would require an annual income of a little over $26,000 to pay for rent, utilities, food, transportation, healthcare, cell phone, internet. Federal poverty level is $12,880. More than twice what this individual requires. A family of 4 would require a budget of almost $64,000 to make ends meet. Just to make ends meet. And the poverty level for that family is $26,500. Now, the difference that makes is a lot of programs available to poor people use the federal poverty level as an index for qualifying for the services. These are people that struggle on a regular basis. Now, even though they work hard, they have difficulty day to day. You can have to do a car repair and not be able, as a result, to pay your utility bill. So what do you do without transportation or electricity? One member of a household may lose their job, and then multiple bills can be paid. Moving to better housing or finding any housing instead of living on the street requires not only a down payment for rent, but a deposit for utilities. Various organizations in my community assist these persons who live somewhere between living a stable life and the federal poverty level. I volunteer, like I said earlier, my work isn't connected with a fee anymore. I volunteer to a couple of these organizations. I'll talk a bit about one of them and what Descriptive helps me with in working with it. My organization is called Good Neighbors. And the mission is to help our other neighbors out of a temporary crisis. Usually it's a financial. And there are challenges to their basic needs, basic human needs. Now, this is a citation that you can find under Peter's collected works, University of Colorado. Credits given here to Aylesworth, Lassiter, and Osorio. They did an exposition of basic needs. Now, I'm only going to mention a few of them, but physical health, affiliation and belonging, food, shelter, safety. So you can think of somebody, especially somebody who's living on the street. All of those needs are challenged. All of those are questionable. So what we do at Good Neighbors is we coach. We do what we can to assist these people to come up with some kind of a plan that'll help them move more towards self-sufficiency, as well as getting them out of some crisis that they're in at the present time. We make referrals, we network, sometimes partner with organizations like the Salvation Army, other community action agencies. Now, on a busy day, I may have 30 minutes for a coaching session. On a non-busy day, maybe an hour. And I only have one session. I don't get to reschedule them for next week, Tuesday. In other words. There's a challenge to that. But various of the descriptive policies help me and enable me to do a little something there anyway. All right. Always greet the person I'm going to coach with a title. Mr. This, Mrs. That, Ms. This, so on. I treat them with respect, and above all else, I treat them as persons, not as some artifact of a psychological theory or financial theory. I let them know from the outset that we're going to be of assistance. We're going to get something done, and something will be better for them. No question about that. It will be the case. I want the neighbor to know we're on their side. Just like we're on the client's. And we will succeed. We'll get something done. During the course of the interview, I have many opportunities to legitimize their difficulties, their struggles. And I use achievement description, as we've been instructed to do, to highlight outcomes. For example, if you save money on your food bill, you'll be able to put some of that towards other bills, or towards some kids' clothing, or towards that car bill that you have. And I take it as a given that any neighbor that I see is going to be able to do something. Therefore, I don't buy any victim acts. They can do something. We can do something together. So, those of you familiar with Dr. Rosorio's work, expressed in clinical topics, are recognizing some small listing here of the policies that he presents. You can find them easily in the index. Treat people as persons, be on their side, legitimize, achievement descriptions, go by victim acts. It helps me to do that bit of work. And I have descriptive to thank for that. So, folks. Any questions, comments, criticisms, observations, whatever?
I've got a comment there.
Yes, sir.
No, I like the whole tenor of what you're presenting, just, you've left your clinical hat per se, when you retired, but you brought yourself into the world as a descriptive psychologist and are just continuing to bring forward things that make sense to you and apply them into the situations that you encounter in their world. I like that.
Thank you. Truth be told, it's all I got for this kind of thing. And there's nothing to compare, I try to use the best that I have, and I'm grateful.
Mine has a question.
David, CJ asked if you'd say a little bit more about achievement descriptions, and also if you'd stop your screen share, it'll increase the size of the view.
Stop the share. You hit the red button up there
It's a red button.
at the top.
I should stop sharing.
Yes.
Okay.
Here we go.
Oh, hi, everybody. So who wanted to know some more about achievements?
CJ Stone wanted to know more about achievement descriptions.
Oh, well, it's a way to get around, resistance, I guess you could say, to use an old-fashioned word. What am I remembering from Pete? He had a client who was very abusive to her child. And the client insisted that she's only trying to teach this kid moral lessons. And I think Peter said something on the order of, well, he gets mighty black and blue from your moral teaching. So you're not in the person's face. You're not confronting, you're just using the achievement description to make a point that's, in this case, an inarguable one, I think. So It's a way to stay safe as a therapist. It's a way to stay safe as a coach. It's a way to make a point without engendering resistance. So.
Excellent. Oh, I guess back to the sexual example earlier, you were offering them a contemplation.
I would hope so.
Didn't. Joe and then Rich.
Yes,
Just a comment about the achievement descriptions. Pardon me. He wasn't, long ago, he explained to me, it avoids discussion of intention.
yes,
It's all around that.
right. Exactly so. Rich.
Yeah, and the risk of degradation, fault finding, blaming, inadequacy descriptions, that would go against all the other policies and run the risk of either never establishing the therapeutic alliance or betraying them.
Right. There's a.
You know, like it's your fault, I mean, yeah, implying it's your fault that you're in this situation.
Right.
If only you had
Well, you.
done this, that, then.
Is that it? Thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate you all.